Well, we have big news to talk about on today's show. I am John Canzano. You can find my work at johncanzano.com. He's the great Jon Wilner. You can find him at wilnerhotline.com. Gonzaga to the Pac-12 conference. It is official. The Pac-12 has long coveted Gonzaga, been in discussions with Gonzaga, finally wrapped that up and locked down the Zags. What does it mean? What comes next? We're going to get into all of that on today's episode. Wilner, let's just go through this. Like, what was your reaction as the discussions turned to a formal agreement sometime late Monday night and into Tuesday?
Man, it is busy these days, isn't it? Like, I sometimes forget that there's a football season going on too. But
Yeah.
This is the third straight week where there's been big Pac-12, maybe the fourth big Pac-12 realignment news. To me, what happened today kind of just fits in the context of what happened last week. I'm losing my sense of timing here.
Right?
Last week, they tried to get the three schools from the American. They were turned down. And then they got Utah State, and then they were turned down by UNLV. I just feel like the pivot to Gonzaga, away from football schools to Gonzaga, just kind of made sense based on where they were. Like, they needed a win, but they also needed to show that they've got a strategy behind all the things that we're seeing and hearing and reading about. And Gonzaga fits within a bigger strategy, a lot better than UNLV does.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering, I mean, clearly they're building a great basketball conference. That is part of the objective here, and part of their objective as they go to sell their media rights and think about NCAA tournament units and distribution. But they needed a win. You hit on it. They needed a victory. They needed a win. This is a blue chip win. This is, a home run. It's a tent pole. It's a brand that you bring into the fold that, really kind of underscores the idea that, Mountain West Conference was fighting to just kind of keep it together. Pac-12 was maybe being a little pickier, a little more strategic.
Yep.
And I go back to that Whitman County courthouse, Wilner. I was there in that courthouse when the Judge Gary Leiby, ruled in favor of, Oregon State and Washington State. And then the settlement came after that. And, Oregon State and Washington State fought for this brand. They thought there was value in the brand. Obviously, the top of the Mountain West Conference looked over at the Pac-12's brand and said, that's better than where we are. And Gonzaga now has looked over and said, that's better. I think it kind of takes some of the stigma away from joining the Pac-12 now as they look to fill that last spot. Like, could they go after somebody that we're not even talking about? Could there be a Power 4 school that's, restless where they are, that also views basketball in the West as, something that they'd like to be part of? I don't know, but it, to me, just kind of reinforces the brand, makes it look like the Pac-12 had a strategy. Teresa Gold telling me this is part of our strategy. Love to know what comes next, but big win for a conference that needed a win. Let's face it.
Yeah. And you know what? It's possible that this was part of the strategy all along, and the timing is exactly what they figured all along. We don't know, but it didn't seem like it because there was so much focus on going to get those three American Conference schools. It didn't work out. I always felt like their strategy was better than the narrative for the last, 10 days or so. This is a holy S kind of, because now you got a college sports fan in North Carolina or in Nebraska. The Mountain West schools moving over, that's one thing. But, oh, wow, the Pac-12 got Gonzaga. That resonates from coast to coast. Now, certainly basketball is not football in terms of audience and in terms of money, but big basketball brands, and Gonzaga is, it may not be quite at the Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, Carolina level, but it's next tier for sure. And there's value. Then we should get into the different types of value that Gonzaga brings, because I think it's more than just the dollars and cents.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a, when we talk about the NCAA tournament now, I'll step back and look at the conference that now has been shaped.
Yep.
You look at San Diego State and Boise State and Colorado State and Gonzaga joining. this conference, if you average out the last 3 seasons, it's 4.7 NCAA tournament berths. This is a 4 or 5 bid conference in its current form. What will it be moving forward? We'll find out. But these are Q1, quadrant one, games being played between these teams. And it's, I think, exciting. But you talk about the additional value. Okay, let's get into that. There are NCAA tournament units that are tangible. There's potential media rights money that's tangible. What are the intangible benefits, or maybe the things that people aren't talking about when it comes?
One of them certainly is just the stature of having Gonzaga in your conference, along with San Diego State, right? NCAA tournament runner-up 2 years ago. So there's 2 tentpole. I'd argue that the 4 best programs in the west of the Rockies the last however many years, right? It's Arizona, UCLA, Gonzaga, and San Diego State. I don't know what order, but 2 of them are now in the same conference. The value to me too is the conferences are judged on brands. I mean, that's why the SEC took Texas and Oklahoma. It's why the Big Ten wanted USC, right? The brands are what drives audience. They drive value. They just drive attention, media oxygen. And Gonzaga is a basketball brand. I also think it could lead to other schools. You reference this, other schools, either football or non-football, wanting to be a part of the Pac-12 because Gonzaga is involved. I think it could lead to some scheduling alliances. The Big 12s, they want to schedule Gonzaga. Those schools want Gonzaga coming into their home arena or on a neutral court. ACC as well. UConn situation, I think, is very interesting, right? We should get into that, whether UConn is a potential partner for the Pac-12 in football or, some kind of basketball deal. I just think it makes you more attractive in both sports, even though Gonzaga doesn't have football. The Pac-12 is now more attractive in football, even though Gonzaga doesn't play football.
Yeah, you're walking taller. You got a new set of sneakers on. You got your first day of school clothes on now with Gonzaga in the room.
Yeah.
It also made me think about something that I was sad about last March. I was at that final Pac-12 tournament in Vegas, and I was thinking, gosh, I went over to go watch the WCC tournament that was in Orleans Arena. And I got to be honest, it was a downgrade. It was an older arena. It seemed a little darker in there. And I just thought to myself, gosh, is this where Oregon State, Washington State are going to be playing now? This is where they've been demoted to. Because I think in 2026 and beyond, you could see the Pac-12 basketball tournament in Vegas with Gonzaga and San Diego State part of it, Boise State, Colorado State, Oregon State, Washington State better invest because otherwise they're going to be doormats in this conference because it is a very good basketball conference. And maybe there's some additional media revenue in that, Wilner, as you talk about your conference TV deal and what you could monetize. I was told that, the Pac-12 was exploring a lot of creative possibilities or would explore creative possibilities when it went to market with media rights. These basketball tournaments, basketball events, obviously are additive in that world. It's not like adding a blue chip football program, but it's the next best thing.
Sure. It's out of the Brett Yormark playbook, right? And not that he's the only one with that playbook, but he has been the most visible commissioner among the power conferences to pursue basketball schools, right? I mean, he talked to Gonzaga. He talked to UConn about joining the Big 12. Yormark believes that basketball is a valuable long-term play, that there's untapped dollars and cents associated with basketball in the media ecosystem because the streamers are going to want high-quality content and they're going to need tonnage. And you can provide a lot of basketball games, more than you can football games. And that's kind of the origin of his strategy. And I think the Pac-12 is kind of following that, right? They are going to go to market. And I would imagine they are going to market tomorrow if they already haven't started, right? And I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. But they now have a structure of a conference that they can take to ESPN and Fox and whoever else and say, all right, what are we worth to you?
Yeah, and look, as far as what comes next and what is additive, I totally agree with you that you can go to market now and you can ask those networks to put in escalators just the same way that the Big
Yep.
Ten did. They had escalators for Oregon and Washington that were factored into those equations. And our media world friends have told us that it's not unusual for schools to say, hey, model us a deal, then model us a deal with school X or school Y involved in it. Because now, if you're the Pac 12, you can go back to Memphis and you can say, hey, do you want to be part of this basketball renaissance that's going on in the West? Hey, guess what? Here's the number. Here are actual numbers that are concrete, not a spreadsheet that we can give to you. They can also go back to UNLV, presumably, and go, hey, any buyer's remorse? And by the way, did you sign something that is that is binding or non-binding? Or, where do you sit?
Yep.
Or you may even be able to shop at a little higher level and, maybe make some offers. And if your goal is to try to close the gap and, be alongside the Big 12 or the ACC one day, this was a step in that direction. You're right about Brett Yormark. He's been very aggressive, absolutely wanted to do these kinds of things, and has positioned his conference to do some creative outside the box things. But I don't think his presidents in the Big 12 had the appetite for, they just digested football expansion.
Yeah.
Here came ideas about UConn and Gonzaga. And, I have to think that the Big 12 right now is looking over going, gosh, did we miss that train? Or what, how is that going to work out for the Pac-12? There may just be some curiosity there.
For sure. I think it's important, like you mentioned, who knows where they're going to turn next? We should get into that as well. But this opens up a lot of possibilities in a landscape where nobody has any idea what's going to happen next, right? And I think part of the Pac-12 strategy is to maintain some flexibility, right? They've got the foundation set. We don't know what the impact of that House lawsuit and revenue sharing is going to be. We don't know if athletes are going to become employees or when they will become employees. What's going to happen in 5 years when the Big Ten has to redo its media deal? Everybody is anticipating that there's going to be this rupturing of the conference structure in the 2030s. Maybe the Big Ten and the SEC become like the NFC and the AFC, and they're playing their own game. Everybody else is playing a different game. But the Pac-12 has got the chess pieces now and the flexibility, to be able to position itself properly. And I think all these schools that have joined the conference, they're all looking at the 2030s and saying,
yeah,
I want to be in position to get into some kind of whatever that next iteration is of college sports. I want to be in it. And the Pac-12 setup, I think, is a platform for them, right? This is not Gonzaga's last stop. They want to get into the Power 3 or 4, whatever it's going to be. The Pac-12 is a way to get there.
Yeah, and that Pac-12 brand, again, part of the success. For people who don't know, the NCAA minimum for conference membership, basically to say that you're a conference, the Pac-12 still needs one more school that plays all sports, including football. They can't just add a football-only member now and be compliant. They have to bring in somebody who plays football, plays all sports. So keep an eye on that and put your head around that. I know that I was told that the Pac-12 wanted to talk with Grand Canyon University, but I don't know how serious that is, Wilner. It feels like at this point, it would just be some discussions. I know that Grand Canyon had expressed some interest, the minute it found out that Gonzaga was out the door. But if I'm the Pac-12 right now, I'm focused on media rights, maybe getting to market, or maybe circling back and talking to some football and all sports members who might want to be part of it. And keep in mind, I was told early on, Wilner, that the ideal number was 9 for football, and they're still at 7 for football. So I could see 2 more schools out there. Are there 2 schools somewhere out there that we're not talking about? Or is it Memphis, Tulane, revisit? Is it UNLV in Memphis? I don't know, but it's going to be exciting to find out.
It will. And you never know about that NCAA certification standard, right? I mean, there's so many things about the NCAA that are up in the air. In 6 months, who knows? Maybe you won't need 8 full members to be certified. Maybe you only need 7. It's such a tumultuous time that I think they're kind of preparing for anything. And including, maybe they have Gonzaga and maybe they get UConn as a football member only, and somehow that works for a next version of certification. To me, UConn is just really a very interesting piece if they can get UConn football and then arrange for some kind of scheduling agreement where UConn basketball, men and women, play home and home series with Pac-12 schools, right? That would be a huge draw.
I think they could get the basketball arrangement anyway. And
Maybe.
I keep coming back to something, I don't think it's accidental that the geography here has worked. They have been really focused on the schools they are actually landing, not talking with, having discussions with. Did they make an offer to Memphis, or were they just talking terms? It's all semantics, right? The bottom line is they have added schools that are all in the western part of the United States. And it kind of fits the Pac-12's brand, what they talked about when realignment happened to them back in the day. They said, oh, these schools are scattering, loyalty and geography and tradition don't matter. So I wonder if, they really will go after schools that are, anywhere west of or east of Texas. Like, will they try to stay more regional than others? I don't know. We will find that out as well. But
and they also have money, right? They haven't spent wildly. They have been pretty prudent. We don't know exactly what the financial terms are with Gonzaga and whether they're going to get a full share, including CFP money. But they didn't, they weren't willing to spend any more than $2.5 million is what the Memphis AD said, and they weren't going to get into a bidding war over UNLV.
Yeah.
So they still got some money left to spend if they need to.
Yeah, and some of the speculation too about the whole Memphis, Tulane, South Florida thing is, I know that they presented some terms to those schools. And then it was interesting to me that very quickly the American Athletic Conference schools all sort of issued that solidarity statement. They didn't sign anything. They didn't, sign an agreement saying that they got a boost in revenue, and I just kind of wonder how fast that happened. If the Pac-12 was expecting a little more back and forth, and instead, because they had signaled the move so obviously that Tim Pernetti, the American commissioner, was just ready to, with that statement, and it put maybe Memphis, Tulane, and South Florida in a position where they had to go along with it. Like, maybe there was a more protracted conversation that needed to happen back then that can now happen, when everybody's not looking so desperate,
and the Memphis AD, Ed Scott, certainly left the door open, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, basically he's saying, if you come back to me with more money, let's talk. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And look, we all know that these decisions get made, at a 20,000 foot level. And sometimes, by the time the AD is talking about it, that's the decision's been made or whatnot. But I just think it's a win for the Pac-12. This is a conference that did so much wrong. You and I have talked about it in the last 2 years here. Like, they've just mismanaged, bad leadership, misplayed their hand in the media rights negotiations of that winter and summer and in spring. And now they got something right. And I think Teresa Gould should, take a brief victory lap before, getting back to business, because I think it was a nice moment for her conference.
No doubt. And really, since Washington State and Oregon State took over the conference, last week was rough because you get turned down by UNLV. It looks bad, right? It looks like you made a mistake by not getting them the first time.
They whiffed. I mean, they whiffed twice.
They whiffed. Yeah, it seems like it. It does. But they really only had one bad week in the last 55, 56. Right. Washington State, Oregon State, and Teresa Gould, they've made a lot of smart strategic moves, starting with the lawsuit, right, and the scheduling agreement. Everything. Last week was a bad one, but they haven't had many bad ones, that's for sure.
Yeah, and Oregon State gets a big gift, a $3 million gift from one of their alumni, the former CEO of Dutch Bros, Joth Rickey, who is now the chairman at Burgerville, 2 Oregon companies. I talked to him. He's given $3 million to the basketball programs. He's stoked. He's stoked at the idea that Gonzaga is coming to Gill Coliseum and Oregon State's going to be playing Gonzaga. And, he's in for $3 million because he's saying, hey, this was me buying into my university, but you're going to need that kind of investment basketball wise to stay in this conference. You're going to get blown off the floor. I mean, these are good programs with good coaches and robust fan bases that will support.
No doubt. But you know what? Burgerville sounds really good right now
I
because
know.
it's been a long day, as it usually is when realignment hits, right? What are we going to next here?
All right, let's pivot here just for a second. Can we talk a little bit about the Mountain West?
Sure.
This got lost. This got lost in the Gonzaga announcement. About 30 minutes after the Pac-12 announced Gonzaga, the Mountain West came out and said they're adding UTEP. They made that announcement. I got to give Gloria Nevarez a fist bump on this. If she holds this together, if UNLV doesn't have second thoughts and bolt, and she ends up back in a bad situation, she has done what George Kliavkoff failed to do. She's thrown money at it. Criticize her if you want for that, but those are the resources she has. That's the play she has to make. I got to give Gloria a little bit of credit. We know she's a college basketball player. We know she's a competitor. She did this out of competition and out of grit, and it looks like she has pieced the Mountain West back together again for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think she deserves some credit and some criticism, both. I don't think it's there's some nuance to it, and certainly she has kept it together. It's like a meatball surgery kind of deal, right? And we'll see who they have for their last full-time member.
Yeah.
I do think she misplayed it with the scheduling agreement, which led to, and other things that led to the Pac-12 deciding, we're going to go take those 4 schools, and led to those 4 schools saying we're leaving. But yeah, she also deserves credit for keeping this thing alive. But we'll see. I mean, until they got a media rights deal, the Mountain West is in a precarious position. Let's not forget that.
And as I pointed out, UNLV, did they sign something that's binding, or are they now going to circle back and go, wait a minute, we have a little bit of Final Four pedigree ourselves. The house that Tark built, all of that, is UNLV suddenly going to go, hey, we want to be with Gonzaga.
Yep.
So keep an eye on that. But that whole Pac-12 Mountain West thing, he said, she said, I don't know what to make of it, because, I went at the Mountain West and I said, how in the world can you ask for $30 million for that scheduling agreement? And they said, well, that was a counter offer to the Pac-12 offering $7 million. They felt like they had lowballed. So they, it was kind of a tit for tat move there, but, clearly a reverse merger was the best case scenario for the Mountain West, and the Pac-12 lost interest in that and did not appear to be playing. And I do know that, the Mountain West Conference had talked about, could they divide Oregon State and Washington State? They were talking about maybe making a play for Washington State, and I don't think the Cougars would have listened. But that's kind of where they ended up, is they ended up, frenemies that in the end. But, if she holds this together, I don't know how you don't just say fist bump to her, because George Kliavkoff failed, and he had better advantages. He had the 10 schools in a room for an extended period of time and lost out on that. And Gloria, to me, at this point at least, looks like she has pulled it back together using whatever resources she has.
Yeah, well, we'll see about the resources, right? We've got the lawsuit, the Pac-12's lawsuit. She's going to have some. Her schools didn't really have any place to go either. I mean, where were Wyoming and San Jose State going to go? I think that the Mountain West, and not just within the last couple weeks before the scheduling agreement deadline on September 1st, but I just think generally the Mountain West position, we're doing you a favor, us against them over the course of a year. My sense is that didn't really sit well, and that the reverse merger idea kind of petered out because Washington State and Oregon State didn't want to have anything to do with something like that, because they were put off by the Mountain West's approach. That's just my sense.
Yeah, it probably started too, though. Let's go back to the Pac-12. When they first made that scheduling agreement, it was a lot of sort of looking down on the Mountain West.
Yeah.
And, I think it goes both ways. I think also it's kind of funny because I bet you anything, Wilner, the Big Ten and the SEC were sitting, looking down from the castle, laughing at the villagers fighting over that piece of turf outside the walls of the village. It was a turf war between these two conferences in the West that were, fighting for relevance. And I think the Pac-12's brand ultimately wins that for the Pac-12. But Teresa Gold also
been around for 25 years. Yeah.
Yeah, Teresa Gold did some smart things too. I mean, I
She
think
did.
she's played this game very well,
She did.
aside from maybe the
Yeah,
last
for
week.
sure.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you about Gloria. We'll see. I think she's still got we should not underestimate the last 0.2 miles of the
Yeah.
marathon she's got to deal with and
True.
getting that media deal signed at a level that's reasonably acceptable.
Yeah. Can we touch on this a little bit? The Big Ten and the SEC meeting, plotting. What are they trying to do? Do they want this whole college football tournament for themselves?
Pretty much. I think that's basically it, right? And there was plenty of reports, plenty of discussions in the spring about automatic bids for those two conferences. Should they each get 4 automatic bids? Should they get 3? Should they be guaranteed the 1 and 2 seeds in a 14-team event? Right? I mean, it is clear that they are directing traffic on the college football playoff. And these meetings, I think, are about that, but also about more than that and some scheduling arrangements potentially. It's just generally those two conferences locking arms and leaving everybody else behind. And the meeting, I think it's next week, and maybe this week. I have lost track of time. It's just them, a manifestation of the partnership that has been created. They've got an advisory council they're working together on. That's just the way it's headed.
Yeah, I don't like it. I think there should be, there should be a czar of college football that's involved in this and sort of helping mediate all of the differences between these entities, because the ACC, the Big 12, and the Group of 5 schools, the Pac-12, they're all in this other bucket. And unfortunately, the Big 10 and the SEC have a tremendous amount of leverage, and they are well funded.
Yep.
This is akin to like the New York Giants and the New York Jets looking over at the Kansas City Chiefs and going, why are we spending money? Why are we sharing revenue with you? The league's not better with the big markets running away with it. We see it in other sports, right? Look at what happens in the NBA and what happened for years. It turned a lot of people off. You don't feel like your team has a chance to win. You don't need 3 automatics in your conference if you've got a great conference. You need an automatic berth for the conference champion. Everybody else should be at large. That's how it should be. I trust the committee to, more than I trust the SEC and the Big Ten to tell me what's right. You shouldn't need 3 or 4 automatics in your conference if you're those conferences. It's ridiculous. If your teams merit berths, they will get berths. I don't like any of this. And I don't like the fact that, it feels to me like the ACC, the SEC, and, the Power 4 schools should all be in the room together, at least, when making decisions like this. And now I feel like maybe our lawmakers going to have to get involved. Are we really going to pull United States senators into this and go, hey, is this an antitrust issue? Couldn't these two things break off and just do this? And, are they creating an anti-competitive environment with this? I mean, those are all questions that like a czar of college football could help answer and say, hey, wait a minute, it's great for you guys, but this wouldn't be good for the college game and it wouldn't be good for the country.
Right. Well, the one issue with creating a czar of college football is then the SEC and Big Ten would have less power, right? Yeah. Then they'd have somebody over them. And right now they're running the show. I also think it's worth pointing out, right? If the Pac-12 still existed in its previous form, as say the 10 schools had stuck together and maybe added 2, then you have 5 power conferences, and the voting and the balance is a little different than it is now. Not that the SEC and Big Ten still wouldn't have had a lot of influence, but I don't think it would have tilted to the extent that it has with the Pac-12's implosion from its original form. So, that's part of it too.
100% that the SEC and the Big Ten have benefited, in addition to some of the TV networks from the downfall of the original Pac-12. And so I think it's really interesting that this meeting's being called at a time in which the Pac-12 is sort of threatening to disrupt a little bit too, Wilner. If they do establish themselves back as a legitimate, clear 5th best conference in the country, the discussion after that is going to be about, hey, how much revenue are they entitled to as a conference? And
right,
shouldn't they get a share that's similar to the Big 12 and the ACC? And that is not what the Big Ten and the SEC want to see. They just consolidated. They just got control, more control.
Yep.
They don't want to cede more control back and reverse that. But it would actually be good for the game. It'd be good for college football to have some balance and some checks there and really good teams from the western part of the United States competing.
It would. It would. It's not necessarily as efficient a market for Fox and ESPN, but it would be better. It would be better for the game. And
yeah,
we should add that there is a look-in the college football playoff contract after the first 2 years. So after the 2027 season and then postseason, there's a look-in, and they could reshape what the entire CFP looks like for the last few years of that contract cycle. So we'll see. I know the Pac-12 wants to improve its position by then.
Yeah. And the Pac-12 was Teresa Gold talked to that point and said that she plans on, utilizing what leverage is available to her to try to increase her conference distributions. And right now they're getting $3.6 million per school. And, I think the Big 12 and the ACC are somewhere around 11, 12, 13 million per school. And then the Big Ten and the SEC are getting 20 million plus. And so there's a real disparity over, a 5-10 year period. How do you stay in that race if you're getting funded at a level that is so far behind? So again, we'll see what happens. Speaking of competition on the field, before we go, the most interesting games of the week, Wilner.
You start.
Okay, I'm going to start. All right, I'm going to go Friday night. The return of Jonathan Smith to the state of Oregon. Michigan State's at Autzen Stadium. Games on Fox. Should be a big audience. The Oregon Ducks return from UCLA. They had an 8 o'clock kickoff last Saturday night. They didn't get home till after 2 a.m., Wilner. They were landed in Eugene after 2 a.m. They did not practice Sunday, even though it's a short week. They took Sunday off, so they went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday's a walkthrough. Here comes a game. Is it a trap? Will Beaver fans root for the Ducks this week because they hate Jonathan Smith so much? So many subplots on this game. For me, it is the most interesting game of the week.
Well, he certainly knows Oregon's systems, right? I mean,
yes.
In terms of preparation, they got a long way to go for a Friday game. We've seen a couple of instances where the road team on Fridays had trouble. Arizona at Kansas State, Washington at Rutgers. It's a tough deal. I'm going to go with the 3 words: game day in Berkeley, right? I think that this is now there's only 5 campuses, power conference campuses, that ESPN Game Day has not broadcast from, now that they have decided to go to Berkeley this week for the Miami game. And it's not just game day, right? This is interesting because Miami is undefeated. They're trying to get, into the playoff, and Cal's look pretty good. And if Cal wins, it's more chaos in the ACC. And the other piece to it is Justin Wilcox did pretty well against Mario Cristobal.
Yes.
You saw that firsthand in some of those Eugene games. They did very well against Cristobal. I think it's going to be a great game, very close.
Yeah, and I have a theory on that Cristobal Wilcox issue.
Hit me.
Because, Justin Wilcox is a great defensive coach, first of all. Like, he's a really good coach and knows what to do. But the way Mario Cristobal coached at Oregon was, he really shortened games with a lot of running plays, played kind of methodical, and he tried to win games 24-17 instead of 52-21, right? He was trying to play these games that were, lower scoring games, a lot of running, a lot of defense, put your foot in the ground. And I just think it played to Wilcox's strengths, because you put Justin Wilcox in a game like Auburn earlier this year that is a close game back and forth. You make it a defensive game. He knows what to do in that kind of game, and he can really limit what you can do offensively. And so I think it actually kind of sets up, obviously game day went, hey, we may never have a chance to go, Telegraph Avenue, patchouli oil, hula hoops, and bubbles. We may not have a chance to do that again. So they're going to Berkeley. I can't wait to see how Berkeley shows up for this. But they also, I think, recognize that, Cal, which lost to Florida State, could make this interesting. They could make this a little dicey, unless Mario Cristobal really has relinquished control of that offense and is just going to let it be what it can be with Cam Ward. Ward's had some good games against Wilcox himself, but
Yes.
Cristobal, I watched him go to Berkeley and struggle.
Yep.
And, he's in these 17-10 games and pulling his hair out because Wilcox knows what to do in that kind of wrestling match.
Yep. Cal is built for 20 to 17, not 50 to 45. No doubt about that. What else you got?
Well, I'm looking a little bit at, I'm a couple of things. I want to see how Boise State and Washington State both react spinning out of last week's big matchup. I'm looking at Boise State's schedule now and Washington State's schedule, Wilner, and I'm taking a little bit of a long view here, but Boise State's got the game at UNLV. Washington State, there's still an 11-win season out there for them. What happens in the wake of last week's huge matchup and Ashton Genty, who looks like Barry Sanders out there.
Yeah.
For me right now, if I have to cast my Heisman vote today, he's on it. Like he's either 1 or 2, and maybe Travis Hunter's on there, but he might be the most valuable player to any team in the country, MVP type season. So I'm just kind of watching those two programs. It was such a big matchup last week on the blue turf.
Yep.
I want to watch Washington State's reaction, their bounce back, and Boise State, can they just kind of be that unflinching, disciplined machine that they have been in the past and spin out of this, what was a big win, playing really good football.
Yeah, and Boise is a playoff contender because there is the highest ranked team from the group of 5, Mountain West, American, Sun Belt, MAC, Conference USA. Highest ranked team is getting in the playoff. There's an automatic bid, probably the 12 seed. And Boise, UNLV, maybe Toledo, Memphis, there's a few schools in the running, but Boise certainly is up there. If you win the Mountain West, you have got a great chance to get that playoff berth. And it'd be great. I think it'd be great for the sport if Ashton Genty's in the playoff, right? Imagine him on that opening Saturday playing against, whoever the 5 seed is, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Oregon, maybe. It'd be a lot of fun.
Well, the thing I start wondering about with Boise State is, could they be better than a 12 seed the way that they played Oregon? Could they be viewed as like, maybe they're 11, maybe they get a little better matchup. I mean, they played Oregon to a, final play field goal. And I think, that bodes well for them. And I kind of think they are the team from the G5. And then from Washington State's standpoint, I don't think at 11-1 they get in the playoff. I think they're probably still at like best case scenario, maybe 16 or 15 in the CFP rankings. But the way they lost to Boise, I think said too much about them. And but I still think that's a great season that's out there for Jake Dickert's team. And I think, let's see how they go chase it.
Yep. They could absolutely end up 11-1, 10-2.
Last one for you. What else are you looking at game-wise?
I am kind of curious to see if the UCLA Penn State game is a complete train wreck, like the Fugitive kind of train wreck, or just a mini train wreck. And part of that is because it's at 9 a.m. for the Bruins, 9 a.m. Pacific. It's the big noon game on Fox. UCLA has drawn that dreaded early window in the Eastern time zone. They lost LSU badly. They got, outplayed badly in the second half. They were outplayed by Oregon. They had lost to Indiana. The only team they've beaten is Hawaii, and that was like 14-13. And now here they got to go across the country and play at 9 a.m. body time in State College. They could not have picked a worse TV window for them this week. So we'll see. I mean, it could end up being, 45-7. We'll see what the Bruins have.
It was, I was at the Rose Bowl. There were about 40,000 there, but about 9 or 10,000 were probably Duck fans.
Yeah.
And it just didn't look good. It didn't have great energy in the building. UCLA got a pick 6, as Oregon was going in for a score that really, made the final score 34-13, made it look better than it really was. They also kicked a 54-yard field goal. Otherwise, it would have been really dismal. But that game could have easily been somewhere in the 40s for Oregon and maybe 3 points for UCLA. It will be ugly with Penn State. It's going to be ugly throughout the regular season. I don't see another win on the schedule for UCLA. Maybe they get Fresno State in the end of the year game, but But if you're 1-10 going into that game, how hard is UCLA playing in that game?
Yeah.
They may not win again. And, Deshaun Foster was terrible at Big Ten Media Day. He had that whole thing where he got up and I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. Really nice guy, trying to work hard, but he's in a position at UCLA where he's in over his head. And I wonder if UCLA will make a move there, or will they try to stick with it for another year, knowing that, it's going to be a really bad look to change coaches after one season.
Nothing about UCLA football indicates they were prepared for this season or for the Big Ten.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a big surprise, given the state of UCLA football, kind of up and down, in and out for the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And they have a brutal schedule. I mean, having LSU on the schedule did not do them any favors.
Yeah, their schedule's tough, but they're in over their heads. They just look bad. They look unprepared. They don't look like they're well coached. Chip Kelly looks smart for getting out, but I don't think UCLA did the right thing with the head coach hire. And I think, they're going to eventually admit it publicly, but can they do it at the end of this season, or do they wait for one more? We shall see.
Indeed, we shall. I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about it next week, unless there's more realignment news.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about something because the way things have been, man. All right, get some rest, hydrate, get ready for whatever's next. Make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Make a commitment to us.
Please.
You'll receive a notification right when we post the next episode. If you're listening on the audio podcast, do the same. Make sure you're subscribed. Share it with your friends and family members. You can read Jon Wilner at wilnerhotline.com. You can read all my work at johncanzano.com. We're back next week with an all-new episode.
Thanks, everybody.